imposed on the people of Nigeria, and all eyes were on the judiciary. Surely the courts would see sense and send the bagman on his way. Did it work out that way? Well, let's hear from the horse's mouth. Nigeria's young and best correspondent, analyst, and commentator, David Hundian, joins us here again on the mother of all talk shows. Well, all eyes were on the judiciary, David. How did it work out?
Not very well, because as is now abundantly clear, the judiciary, as it's generously referred to, signaled to the world and to Nigeria specifically that even the letter of the law, the Nigerian Constitution itself, is essentially a series of suggestions that basically, in the interest of protecting the status quo, the judiciary will essentially make up rules that don't exist on the fly. They will nitpick technicalities which make very little sense to anyone, both within and outside the system. And they will basically work their way back from a predetermined answer to basically to arrive at a series of contrived questions. And the only purpose of doing all of this is to subvert justice. So what is abundantly clear now is that even going forward, even after this inevitably goes to the Supreme Court, the outcome isn't going to be any different, because the Nigerian judiciary has made a mockery of itself. To give you an idea of just how much of a mockery that we're talking about. Now, some of the judgments, the rulings that were pronounced on the day were that, for example, on the issue of the supposed president's drug dealing forfeiture in the United States, where, as you mentioned earlier, he forfeited the sum of $460,000 to the US government, being proceeds of heroin trafficking. The ruling completely sidestepped this issue, made no attempt to engage with that whatsoever, and instead referred to a letter which was supposedly written from the US Embassy to the Nigerian Inspector General of Police in 2003, supposedly clearing somebody known as Bola Ahmad Tinubu of any sort of criminal records in the US. Meanwhile, the person who is sitting as the president, his name is Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So, and if you know anything about law, you would know that such a thing isn't a simple typo, right? It's a whole different person that was requested. The details of a whole different person were requested, and obviously they got back the answer they were looking for, which is obviously, there's no such thing, because no such person exists. And that's what the supposed judiciary relied on 20 years later in 2023 to basically pronounce him innocent. The judgment said, based on that letter, he had no case, and that the forfeiture is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter, so it's fine. That's what the supposed Chief Justice of the Nigerian Appeal Courts ruled. So what has become abundantly clear is that, as it stands, Nigeria has no law. Nigeria has a series of written and codified suggestions, but anything and everything, depending on how much money you have, depending on how much influence you have, anything and everything will be allowed to stand up in court, no matter how stupid, no matter how fatuous the argument is. Everything can fly. Nigeria essentially is no longer a country under law. Nigeria was never a particularly lawful society to begin with, but this, I think, has driven the final nail into the coffin. As I said, shortly after the ruling was put out, as it stands now, if I stand in the middle of the road in front of a TV broadcast camera and I'm holding a gun and I shoot people dead, and this is broadcast to millions of people in 4K UHD quality, I will be fine, because I can go to court now. One of the rulings that was given, for example, was that the vice presidential candidate, who was actually not eligible to run because he had been registered as a contestant for another political office concurrently, which is illegal. The ruling given was that, well, as long he didn't do it intentionally, so it's fine. So essentially now what that means is the maxim which any lawyer anywhere in the world is raised with, which is that ignorance is no excuse under the law, has for the first time been turned on its head in Nigeria by the appeal court. So essentially, as I said, if I shoot a bunch of people dead in the streets in front of a TV camera, my argument in court can be I didn't do it intentionally, so I'm free to go. Another ruling that was given was that, well, the drug dealing forfeiture, the entity involved was the president's bank accounts and not the president's person. So the president's bank accounts forfeited the money and not
that's the one.
the
That one actually made me laugh out loud. The judges said that the money that was forfeited was a criminal, not the person who had the money in his bank account. In other words, it was these naughty $460,000 that are deserved of condemnation, not the person who had them resting in his account. To continue your analogy, you could claim that all these people you shot were not shot by you, they were shot by the gun.
Exactly. And apparently that would fly because that's the depth that we sunk to in the year 2023. So at this point, I think it's become clear now that if we're hoping for any kind of redemption from within the Nigerian system, it's probably not going to happen. At this point, I think it's the Nigerian people themselves, if they have any fight at all left in them, that have to look at what their contemporaries across the border in Niger have done and basically make up your minds. Are we going to consent to be mocked in this manner permanently, or are we going to do something and stand up for ourselves? Currently, there's a sort of mass paralysis sort of going around where everyone is like, oh, if we go out, they're going to shoot us dead in the streets, which they did 3 years ago. There's going to be a massacre, and blah, blah, blah. And, you shouldn't be sitting in the UK, wherever you are, telling people to go out on the streets. Why don't you come home and lead the protest yourself? Which, I mean, I've done that already before. But anyway, apparently I'm expected to come back and, to do that again. And generally, it just seems to me as if, I think until the people themselves decide that they have had enough, this mockery is going to continue because clearly Tinubu himself has no intention of letting go. He clearly has no iota of shame, personal embarrassment, anything like that. He genuinely doesn't care. And the judiciary has also made it clear that they're just as shameless as he is. So essentially, the entire Nigerian establishment has made it very clear that it lacks a single modicum of shame, that is willing to do anything in public. I mean, if you watch the proceedings, you'd have seen toward the end, there was I think the only female justice on the panel, she raised her voice and went into a rant. I was screaming at the petitioners and essentially berating them for bringing up the petition. And I was basically saying things like, did you think that threats from social media would move us to give another judgment? And it was almost as if Tinubu himself was speaking to the petitioners, and this is a judge. So it's become clear that the Nigerian system, if there is no Nigerian system, it's been completely captured. So the Nigerian people themselves at this point need to decide if they're going to consent to be led by their inferiors, or if they're going to do something about it. Ultimately, I don't think there's it's a decision for a journalist or for a politician like Peter Obi to make. I think it's the Nigerian people themselves who have to make that decision, if they ever make that decision.
Going to the Supreme Court now is just kicking it all into the long grass, isn't it? It's just putting it off for another 12 months.
It's not even going to be up to 12 months. I think it's like just because I think the rule is that 60 days from the ruling, which was this past week, is the deadline for a verdict from the Supreme Court. So we're looking at sometime in November potentially. But yes, I definitely think the Supreme Court, I actually think the Supreme Court is even less likely to deliver a sensible verdict than the appeal court, because, the Chief Justice of the Federation, by the way, his name is Kayode Ariwoola. He is actually a very close ally and a personal friend of Bola Tinubu himself. And rumor has it that he was actually placed in that position due to lobbying from Tinubu back when Buhari was the president. So I think anyone expecting a sensible verdict from Tinubu's close personal ally is, it's not being realistic. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there's going to be an even bigger mockery at the Supreme Court. What I am looking forward to, however, is seeing what his ruling on the forfeiture would be. And why I'm looking forward to it is that in 2014, this exact Justice Kayode Ariwoola delivered a ruling, which is, which has been circulated very widely, a ruling stating that forfeiture is itself, the act of forfeiture after the commission of a crime constitutes in itself some form of criminal conviction, and that forfeiture is proof of criminal activity. That was a ruling that he delivered. So I'm looking forward to seeing him essentially roll back his own earlier ruling and state that forfeiture is something else now, that, okay, it's the bank accounts that are responsible and not the individual. I'm looking forward to him doing that. I know he will do that because clearly the Nigerian judges have no shame. He's definitely going to do that, right? I completely expect him to do that, but I want to get it on camera. So which is why I said I'm really looking forward to doing that. It's going to be like a seminal moment in Nigerian history, the point when it became clear to everyone that from the mouth of the Chief Justice of the Federation that Nigeria has no law. It's not a free-for-all. Everybody go outside and do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter anyway. We're looking forward to that.
Nigeria, Nigeria is a great country. Its people, great people, and so numerous, so populous, so hardworking, so prosperous. But they've never produced a political leader of the stature of some of these smaller, poorer African countries. Why do you think that is?
I think that's because the manner in which Nigeria came to be and which it came to gain its independence was remarkably different from its neighbors, for example. So Ghana, for example, there was your conventional sort of anti-colonial independence struggle, and then there was this sort of charismatic leader that came up out of that struggle, a guy called Kwame Nkrumah, who remains a sort of legendary figure in Ghana till today, even though he's long dead. And the country sort of coalesced around a common vision for what an independent future looks like. In Nigeria, there was no such thing. It might surprise you to know that I think the year was 1955, when the motion for independence was first moved in the then Nigerian House of Parliament. Fully half of the country actually opposed the motion. That might sound surprising to anyone who is familiar with African post-colonial history. Why on earth would members of an African parliament oppose independence? But that's the very sort of peculiar makeup of Nigeria, that the way it was put together. I'm not a fan of blaming the British for things that they did 60, 100 years ago. But unfortunately, that's just the reality, that the way Nigeria was put together by the British made it such that there was a very deliberate power imbalance between ethnicities which had almost sort of equal population. So it was sort of like the classic divide and rule thing. So instead of having a country where maybe there's a clear majority and people can sort of coalesce around a shared vision, or, even if it's equally sized groups, they were sort of left to sort of figure it out on their own. Instead, these three groups were sort of pit against each other by the British, which is like the classic empire building way of doing things, so that you get to remain in charge because these three idiots are fighting themselves. That's how Nigeria was put together by the Brits, unfortunately. And all these years later, unfortunately, Nigeria still pretty much remains very much the way it was in the 60s, whereby even though Nigeria has close to 500 plus ethnic groups, they're like basically three majority populations, and they essentially till today remain at loggerheads. They're not really able to agree on anything economically, politically. So the country remains sort of in a de facto state of war, which is why every time there's an election, people die, because it's actual ethnic warfare every time it's time to select a new leader. Part of the reason why Peter Obi's candidacy was such a phenomenon was because he comes from the Igbo ethnic group, which for if you're familiar with the Civil War history, rightly or wrongly, Nigeria's first ever military coup in 1966, was labeled as an Igbo coup. And as a result of that, the Igbos were deliberately politically sidelined for many decades in the Nigerian political mainstream. There's never been an Igbo head of state since 1966. And he seemed to come out of nowhere And for the young people of Nigeria, people like myself who were, we never experienced a civil war. We never grew up in that era. I was born in 1990. This was ancient history by the time I was born. We just saw a competent administrator who could be a good leader. But for the people from older generations, there are all these issues which still exist in their minds, which continue to be a factor in the political equation. So for some people, it was, oh, he comes from this part of the country, so under no circumstances must he, get into that seat. So there's all sorts of complications, making it such that it's very difficult for Nigeria as a country to sort of evolve a common vision for what it even imagines Nigeria should look like in the future. So if you ask someone, I'm from Lagos, it's in the southwest, the largest city in Nigeria. So if you had to ask me what my vision for Nigeria ideally should be over the next 30 to 50 years, I could spend an hour talking about things that I would like to see, certain types of infrastructure investments, and how the sectors that the government should focus on, direct investment that should be made in education and healthcare, changes in law. I could tell you all of these things. But if you ask someone in Kano, which is in the northwest, their vision for Nigeria in the next 30, 50 years, they'll tell you something completely different because they come from a completely different context where the primary consideration is, for many of them, the religion, which is a particularly conservative form of Islam, which, by and large, doesn't tend to coexist well with its neighbors. So there are those issues. If you had asked someone from Onitsha, which is in the southeast, what's their vision for Nigeria, they'll probably give you a different answer as well. So Nigeria is essentially 3 or 4 countries struggling to fight each other, but it's one sort of nation state. So internally, it's never really worked. Externally, obviously, the world only sees a bunch of Africans from West Africa. We're all one nationality. We all carry one green passport. Internally, it's a lot more complicated. So unless there's a significant sort of social and mental revolution that takes place, whereby the young people who are by far the majority of the country's population, as much as 70% of the country's population, decide that they want a break from the past, and that whatever the British did or didn't do, whatever the Ahmadu Bellos and the Ojukus, whatever happened between the 1950s and the 1970s, all of that doesn't concern us now because we live in 2023. Our lives are a certain way now. We want to move forward into the future, and this is what we want. Until that happens, it's going to be very unlikely that Nigeria will coalesce around a sort of, charismatic figure, a sort of Lee Kuan Yew or Kwame Nkrumah or Nelson Mandela. It's unlikely. It's not impossible because, we've seen the emergence of Peter Obi, which was not supposed to happen. So I think we're already seeing the green shoots, some sort of hope. However, as I said earlier, it's up to the young Nigerians themselves to take this to the end, because I think we've used the system as far as the system is willing to let us take it to. We're told after the protest movement, we're told, don't protest, go, form yourselves into a political formation, line up behind the candidate. We've done that, and we actually won the election, and the result was taken from us. We went to court, which is what you were supposed to do, and the court has ruled that, well, it's the gun that shot the people, not the person holding it. So at this point, I think it's the Nigerians themselves who then have to look at the situation and say, okay, we've done everything we're supposed to do. We've played by the rules, and clearly the rules are not designed to work. So now we have to work outside the rules. We have to rebel against the system because the system is designed to keep us in a certain way. So until they make that decision, we will keep on having this conversation, unfortunately.
Well, keep us informed, and I wish you the very best, and the peoples of Nigeria the very best. Thank you, David Hundian, for your expert testimony. Keep an eye on the judiciary. Turned out to be a bit of a waste of time.
We are told that our most distinguished guest is ready and waiting to be engaged, and that cues us to introduce Aisha Yusufu, a human rights campaigner who is being as consistent as the northern star in lending her formidable voice to a number of national causes in Nigeria. Good to have you, Aisha Yusufu. It's a joy to have you on the show this morning. So let's start.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.
Good. Let's start from the very beginning. The outcome of the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, PEPT, as it is called. The judgment is interesting, and it's divided quite a few Nigerians. So help us understand, because I noticed you were there at the petition tribunal. What's your opinion, or what's your thoughts about the outcome of that presentation? 13 hours plus long, where quite a few people were dozing off and nodding off. I don't know whether they did snore, but I was wondering, what's your thought? You stayed awake throughout.
Oh, yes, I did. Nobody, I don't think I heard any snoring, so that wasn't a part of the whole proceedings. But there were quite a lot of people who did doze off. It was quite tiring, you know, just sitting down and just listening. I was there to actually listen, and I paid rapt attention to the whole proceedings. And I'll tell you, overall, just listening to the judgment being read out, and it was disappointing, not even about the outcome, but one, in the way that it was being read, two, in the kind of mannerism, in the intonation, in the kind of words that were being read out. And I will tell you that was my first time of being at the sitting where judgment was being read out in such a manner. And I was expecting, you know, those play of words. I've read certain judgments, like, you know, reading the one of like those Lodening and all of that and what they've said about words. So that in its own way, just listening to it wasn't as interesting and one would have wanted it to be. But that's by the way. On the whole issue was the fact that the judges, in my own opinion, and I'm a witness because I was directly there on that day, is that the justices sounded more like counsels to the respondents than they did like justices. And I know a lot of people have been saying things like, oh, do you think they will charge you contempt of court and all of that? We have opinions. I must air our opinions. When it came to issue of the judgment, when it's related to the petitioners, you could almost feel the anger. The body language was like angry, the intonation, the words that were being used. Do you think we're going to go to the market and go and get evidence? Things like, oh, you think to come to court and prove that there's an election malpractice or rigging, you think it's like drinking, is it coffee by an Englishman? They said, you know, all sorts of, the way it was being done, almost as if the court was angry that there were actually people who had come to question the election that took place. And in terms of the conversation being had, in terms of the judgment, where you saw, it's almost as if INEC did a sterling job, that there was nothing that INEC had done wrong in all the things that it did. But one other thing that I found most peculiar was when it came to the issue of constitutional interpretation, where when it came to the issue of the forfeiture, the judgment was just read. You know, it was just clipply, as if there's nothing on it, and they just passed over it. But when it came to the 25% of FCT, that's when they would tell us that, look, the Constitution is a living document. You don't just literally, you know, put out the meaning. You don't use literal interpretation to just give an interpretation of it and all of that. And I'm wondering, when it came to the forfeiture, why was that such effort was not also put in place to say, this is not just about now, this is not just about a document, this is about the generation that we have right now and the generation that are yet to be unborn, that it's actually a living document. So that kind of, you know, it's almost like there's a difference when it came to issue that needed to be responded to. And for me, I just felt there should be, people should see that unbiased stance from the justices. Also, to add the fact that there was live coverage of the reading out the judgment. They of course didn't want their faces to be seen. They had warned the media about that the faces shouldn't be shown, only when they were coming in. And then I wonder why was there no live coverage when it came to the time where there was going to be the trial itself, where evidence would be brought in, so that Nigeria's people, the world, will be able to see what really transpired in the court as against just seeing the judgment that was read out that day.
All right, then. Thank you so much for setting the tone of the conversation. And I appreciate the fact that you were live in court. So you were able to see things that I guess the rest of the country wasn't able to. But when we talk about the court noting procedural blunders by the petitioners' legal teams, including failure to file witness statements on oath as required, the court also highlighted paragraphs of the petitions that they deemed vague, imprecise, and generic. The court also emphasized the lack of credible evidence presented by the petitioners. Now, are we seeing how these procedural errors impacted the outcome of the case? Some are saying that the justices did a thorough job, to the extent that even some of the senior lawyers representing the opposition parties were chided for their inadequacies to look into their research to build their clients' cases. Are we looking at maybe a situation where the opposition's petition was watery from the beginning? And especially when we look at that in the backdrop of them going to the Supreme Court, they're not allowed to add any more information, any more witnesses. They're taking that same case to the Supreme Court. Would you say that maybe it was a case of the petition being watery from the beginning?
Well, the thing is that for you and I now, because we're not allowed the live proceedings, I wasn't in court all throughout the trial. So I came in, I wasn't in the country, so I was able to attend the one of the judgment. So first of all, that's why they say when you're talking about justice, it must not only be done, but it must also be seen to be done. And one of the things that all of this conversation would have cleared would have been when citizens were making demands that there should be live transmission from the courts during the tribunal sittings. If that had been out, every one of us would have been able to see this watery evidence that we're putting down, or watery case, or whatever the name that it's called, that was put forth. But first of all, that wasn't allowed to happen. And then it is a judgment where it is justices now saying this is what they have arrived at that was allowed to happen. Apart from that is also the fact that there is where they said the way and manner in which INEC had been served in terms of getting the evidence, the material they were supposed to, counsels to the petitioners were supposed to have access to, that they didn't get it. One of the things that we also have to look at is that the court gives instruction, the court gives its orders to INEC, and then INEC doesn't fulfill it. And at the end of the day, we've seen the court just not doing anything about it and just moving on. And this is not something that is just peculiar to the issue of whether it's INEC being asked to allow petitioners' counsels to have access to certain materials. And I could say we're also where amongst the justices, when they were reading out that judgment, where they said that, I think it was Justice Haruna Samani who had read out on the fact that any credible candidate should not rely on INEC for their results and things like that. We've seen it time again and again where courts in Nigeria will give order, either the executive or institutions will not obey these orders, and it's almost as if it's business as usual, and they just continue what they're doing without really looking at it at the fact that this is an affront on them. It's one thing for us to talk about technicalities and all of that. But it's another thing for us to say there were people, the people who were on the petitioners' council, there were a lot of sons there. There are people who had, this is not their first time of doing a trial, election petition. And for say that all of them, every one of them, that they didn't file these things the way they're supposed to be filed. I'm not a lawyer. Probably the lawyers will be the ones to answer that. But what was most instructive was the fact that the whole justice seems to be on the side of the respondents more than they were just being neutral. And for me, just being, even in the court, the body language, the words, it's almost as if they came alive whenever it was issue of the petitioners that were being discussed. That's not supposed to be. And I think it was Lord Denning that said that the law is supposed to be there to protect the weak and not to protect the strong. And we must begin to, and for me, that's why over the years, and this is not my first time, and it's not because of the result of what has happened, but the fact is that we need to begin to look at the independence of the judiciary and let us know, do we have, the way we have state capture, do we have also a judicial capture? Do we have, how do we, the things that from all of this that we all need to be asking ourselves is that how do judges get into office? What is the process that bring them in? Is it a transparent process? Is it a process where it's plagued with nepotism and all of that? And at the end of the day, how does it constantly affect the judgment that come out of the courts over time? And we've seen a situation in Nigeria whereby people go on judicial rulings shopping. So somebody will leave Imo State and go to Jigawa State because they want to be able to have judgment in a certain way. Someone will leave Kano State and go to Edo State because they want it in a certain way. What are the things that are leading to all of this? You find a court of appeal in one state on the same matter, we give a ruling. Another court of appeal in another place on the same matter, we give a ruling. And so that confidence that Nigerians have in the judiciary, even before the presidential election tribunal started, a lot of people were not interested. A lot of people say, oh, there's nothing that's going to come out of it. We know how this. And I remember constantly saying that, look, it's not our business to trust the judiciary. Our business is to overwhelm the judiciary with evidence. And so these are issues that we must ensure that as a nation, justice must be seen. And even in the case of INEC, it's about the processes, it's about the procedure, it's about the things that need to be done. And if these things are not done, we will continue to have a country where people will not have confidence in the government.
Absolutely, absolutely. At that point is where I really want to take it, overwhelm the judiciary with information. And let me take a back step and go back to my own younger days. 1983, the first and only time in my life that I decided I wanted to work for a political party, and that was the Nigeria Advanced Party, NAP, organized and put together by Dr. Tunji Braithwaite, because it captured just the way the obedience were captured. A lot of young people in 1983 were captured by Dr. Tunji Braithwaite because we just believed in his desire to change things. So we joined. And the reason I'm making reference to this was because I was one of those who were polling agents for Nigeria Advanced Party in 1983, and we were able to get copies of all the results and everything and put it together and went to Yaba, coordinated. I was in Ebutemeta, then coordinated and sent all the information. We didn't get a lot of votes. But Peter Obi and the Labour Party seem to have gotten a lot of votes, even by the numbers put together by INEC. You have said a number of times, and I do recall, that you're not really a Labour Party member, but you're an obedient. So help us understand, did the Labour Party fail to gather enough evidence, like you said, which you said was supposed to be overwhelming for the judiciary? Did they fail to gather enough evidence in terms of paper collected across the country to say, these are the papers? We're not even waiting for INEC to present its own on IREV or anywhere else, but we have the documentary evidence. Did it fail?
So the thing about the courts is that we have three arms of government, right? Judiciary, executive, and legislative arm of government. Judiciary is very powerful, and it depends on when you bring your evidence to court. The court will say, oh, this is not admissible in the court, or it doesn't do any of that. Like I said earlier, that was the essence where we needed a live transmission, so that it's not even the justices saying, if there were no evidence that were brought forth, every one of us would have seen that. For me, that was afar from all the proceedings. And you saw where there were people who were transcribing what was happening. They were almost acting as stenographers, transcribing and telling us what was happening in the court. And we saw the picture. We saw the boxes where they say this exhibit had been entered into court, this evidence, these are materials from these places, this polling unit. And to hear the justices say that, oh, there were not even a single polling unit where there were, how did they even put it now, where specific polling units that were mentioned and all of that. It sounds odd. And so for us, reading it, it's listening to them and watching them would have been, if we had also seen the live proceedings, live transmission had been allowed, so that people will be able to see these things and say they were not there. That's what for this. The person that would best answer this question would be the counsel to the petitioners, for them to say, did they not bring any of these things out? For I, as a citizen who watch all of those boxes that were of evidence that were brought in, they even had video evidence that were shown to them, and then it's all for the court to come and say that, oh, there are no evidence that were put before them that they want to use, because at the end of the day, you have a situation whereby there are a bunch of people that are going to just put out the wordings there, oh, as the court pleases, whatever it says at the court pleases. And I look forward to a time where at the court pleases will be replaced by as long as it ensures justice or something in that nature. So I would be in a position to say, for what I saw as a citizen, from what came out of the court, from the pictures and the words, the typing that a lot of people put out there, the transcription that a lot of people put out there, the way evidence put before them. Is that the evidence that the court now decide to accept, or it doesn't have to decide? They are the final at that particular place in their courtroom to do what they want to do. And if they don't accept this evidence at the end of the day, there is really nothing you can do.
In one sentence, then, do you think that the evidence was overwhelming in terms of the documentary, the documents, the paper that were presented, that were collated by Labour Party? Do you think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won? In just 1 or 2 seconds.
I think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won. Indeed, yes, I believe that. And there were a lot of things that were put before them. What they decide to use, I don't have control over that. Nobody has control over that. They are the ones who have control over what they're going to admit, they are going to allow to be admissible in the court as evidence, and what is not going to be allowed to be admissible in the court as evidence. And that's where transparency comes to play. That's where when people were asking for that live transmission, there's nothing wrong in having put that live transmission, so that every one of us would have sat here to be able to say, oh, even before the judgment, to say, oh, maybe they didn't put out enough evidence, or no, they had enough evidence, and all of that. And also, like, just to add to it again, as I'm talking about transparency now, is the fact that all eyes on the judiciary became something that it became almost as if I don't know, almost a crime. What is wrong with people saying we want to put the judiciary on the spotlight? We want to check the judiciary. And I think this was an opportunity for the Nigerian judiciary to actually welcome the scrutiny that is coming from citizens, because for the first time, citizens now seem to be interested in the things that are happening in it. And it was really important for that. But unfortunately, you saw a situation whereby the justices, there was anger, and I think the female amongst them, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't have her name, where she was saying that, oh, people think they can stay on social media and intimidate them. Nobody is intimidating you. What is being done is that people are saying, let's put an eye, let's scrutinize, let's see that's what being an active citizen is all about. That's what occupying your office of the citizen is all about, to put an eye on the different aspect of governance that is happening and follow it through. And at the end of the day, for me, on that day, was also the fact that in that room, getting to the court, everywhere was cordoned off. Armed security agents were all over the place, cordoned off the place. And then when you got inside the courtroom also, there were so many from the executive, even though to me, this government is an illegitimate government. It didn't win the election, and that's my own personal opinion as Aisha Yusufu. And you had the NSA, the chief of staff, the vice president, of course, who should be there because it's also one of the respondents, and all manner of people being there. The national security advisor was in the courtroom, and yet the justices didn't feel intimidated by all of this thing. It's just citizens who are on social media saying all all eyes on the judiciary, don't drop the ball, keep focusing on them, that became the ones that were intimidating. That I found was a bit baffling, honestly.
All right, then. So if we look at the unanimous decision of the Presidential Election Petition Court affirming President Bola Tinubu's election as president of Nigeria, in your opinion, what are the key takeaways from this judgment, or dare I say the significance of such a unanimous verdict in such a high-profile case in terms of its broader implications for Nigeria's legal and electoral system, seeing as most of all our electoral petitions end up in court, no matter what happens, it ends up in court. Are you concerned that this judgment will affect voter turnout in the next 4 years? And as a civil rights activist yourself, between now and the next presidential elections, what should we start to do on ground to make sure that come the next round of elections, we are prepared and even the body language signals a readiness for the electoral body and INEC as a whole?
It's very concerning what has happened, and before I answer your question, is to say that there's a reason. Before, when it comes to gubernatorial election and some other election, they ended at the Court of Appeal. They didn't go to the Supreme Court. But after a while, there was a reason why. Even though sometimes you have unanimous decision, there was a reason why it was not decided that it can't end there, that they will have to take them also to the Supreme Court. The most worrying aspect of all of this is the fact that we also saw an election where INEC had come out to say they had their own guideline, and they came out to say this was what they were going to do. They were going to transmit a result electronically to the IRF. Even when in November 2022, there were a group of people that had come out to say that, look, INEC was not going to do that transmission. There was something fishy that was going on, which is what later on played out. INEC will come out to vehemently deny that any of that they were going to use all of this thing. And at the end of the day, on election day, at the same there were 3 elections that took place, that of presidential, the senatorial, and also the House of Rep. 2 of them had no issues. They were uploaded. They had no glitches. Everything went on. But when it came to that of the presidential election, there were glitches, and these things didn't go on. So which sort of pointed out more to sabotage. And then you have before the 2023 election, this whole system had been tested, I think, Edo and some other states. And even when you had the gubernatorial election, there were no issue. The issues was merely when it came to the presidential election. Free, fair, and credible election must be seen to be free, fair, and credible election. And where you do not have free, fair, and credible election, many people would not want to vote. And that's the biggest concern that we have right now. The reason why people decided to be invested and interested are people who were in their 70s, in their 60s, who had never voted before in Nigeria. They voted this election because they finally felt, okay, one, the words from the assurances that came from INEC that they were going to do this electronic transmission, because many people do know that it is normally when they do that collation, when manual papers are traveling from one place to the other, that a lot of changes happen. And so people had confidence when INEC gave their word. And then the new Electoral Act also made people to be more confident in election and find that, okay, finally their vote is going to count, their vote is going to matter. But here we saw the brazenness that happened, the impunity, the way and manner in which the rigging was done in such a way that numbers were changed, figures were changed. You see, let me give hypothetical example. You see something like 212, and then you turn the 2 and 1 and make it a big fat 0, and then you now turn it to 2, and then they use TPEX, correcting fluid to correct and write on it, and then change another person's numbers for it to correct. And these things were uploaded. Blank sheets were uploaded. And at the end of the day, there is not a single thing in that judgment that talked about INEC, in a way and manner that INEC will not continue the institutional rascality that it displayed in the last election with such impunity. And so now what has happened is that with the judgment that we have, INEC has been given an enabling environment for them to do whatever they want to do and then just get away with it. And then you begin to ask, why then did people waste their money? Because this is also a civilian and political coup. And I've said it before, and I'm going to repeat it here again. The way we treat military coup is the same way we treat civilian and political coup. Because when you take away the mandate of the people, when you steal the mandate of the people, that in its own way, it's a coup also. Look, one thing that we all must understand is that the outcome of the election does not matter. If there was free, fair, credible election, if there was that transmission of result the way INEC was said they were going to do it, and the results all came out, and everybody saw it was transparent, and the results at the end of the day is still what it is today, everybody would have moved on, because it would have meant that there were more Nigerians who wanted the government, the then government, to continue. But that isn't the case, and that is where we must be focused on. And please, 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 Nigerians must stop this thing that we do every time, to sweep things under the carpet and say, oh, it has happened, let's move on. There will be a murder somewhere, somebody will come and tell you, but the person has died, now why are you following the case? And that's why these things keep repeating themselves, because for all of these things to happen, systems must work the way they're supposed to be, processes must be followed, there must be accountability, and where anything is not done, people must be punished for not doing the right thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Asha, help me understand, in terms of where we go from here, let's focus on the civil society. We know that quite a few of them did make some noise, to use the parlance of the words coming out from Gabon. People did make some noise, civil society. But immediately after the results came out from the petition tribunal, there's not a lot of noise being made. It seems there was a calm. There was actually some palpable fear that there was going to be some kind of uproar or some kind of anarchy, and there were policemen all around the place. Even some soldiers did come out. But there's nothing. It's been quiet. So what is expected of the civil society organizations going forward in terms of preparation for the next thing that we expect will take this nation to whatever level we desire it to go? Civil society organizations' role.
Okay, I will talk about this. Before I talk about the civil society organization rules, I think for me, I'll commend the citizens of Nigeria. One of the things we must understand is that Nigeria needs more active citizens and less of activists. This is what we've seen with the 2023 election. We saw the role that citizens have played, just participating in the election and ensuring that, they focus, they campaign, they do all the things that we're good. And we've seen the difference that has happened. Right now, there's a need to also keep people motivated and not disillusioned about the whole election and going away. So there's a need for, I think, even the civil society, civil society organization, there's a need for there to be, how do I put it now, an effort towards crossover. And what do I mean by this crossover? Moving people from activism, from that area, into politics. One of the things we must understand is that politics and activism, the end results are always the same. It's supposed to be for the greater good of the people, though Nigerian politics is the one that is seen as if people are supposed to go in there and loot money and be there for their selfish reasons. It's supposed to be for the greater good of the people. And so where activists and that civil society are making demands, those in politics are the ones who are fixing this demand. So there's a need for that one crossover, because we have a lot of competent people who have character capacity, even though they don't have the money that is usually used in the Nigerian context when it comes to election. Let them get into politics. Being in politics doesn't necessarily mean running for office. Even when it comes to party leadership, that's also something that needs to be, because we need to talk about that. The other thing also that needs to happen is to civil education is very important. Let people understand what role it is for them to continue to be on this whole issue, to not just get disappointed and leave, and the roles that citizens can also play. And then there's also the need for independence of judiciary, independence of media itself. We've had there hasn't been a lot of independence. The civil societies should help to strengthen our media, to strengthen our judiciary system. The civil society also should look at, when it comes to campaign finance it? Is there anything that can be done? Because this situation we have whereby it is the people who have a lot of money or people who have stolen our commonwealth that have the money to be able to perpetuate themselves or their stooges in office. If we continue to do that, we will not get the best people, the most competent people that will come out and lead our nation. And we have a lot of competent people who don't have the money that they're going to waste, or not just campaigning and election, and also in going to court. Then there's also another thing, when it comes to parallel vote tabulation, there's a need to do that. This whole dependence on only INEC being the one that gives, that was supposed to give the results in real time. The civil society, citizens, even media itself should all come together and let's have a parallel vote tabulation method where we have a particular place, just like the IRF that they have, where these results from all over the polling units, as soon as they are being brought up, because I go to vote, you can take the pictures of those. Let's upload it in this particular place. Yes, it might not be admissible in the court because it's only the one that's from the polling unit agents and the ones from INEC that will be admissible in the court. But it will help people to see what these results are, and it will also force the hands of the umpire, which is INEC now in itself, to be able to say, look, there is something that is going on. These results are already there. So even if when they're thinking of beginning to change the result, probably they might have a little bit of hesitation or shame, or not just knowing that there's a spotlight on them that is being done. Beyond also the civil society, I think I'll just quickly take on the international organization, Committee of Nations, to say there needs to be a universally accepted standard of what free, fair, credible election is all about. Situations where we have the kind of election in Nigeria and places like Gabon and Niger, Zimbabwe, different from the kind of election in places like the United States of America, France, Britain, Germany. It has to stop. If certain people are killed in certain places like Nigeria and co, because we have even the former British High Commissioner who was saying that she was fascinated with the result, with the election where people had been killed. That has to stop. We must have that. And then also the international community and Committee of Nations must begin to treat political civilian coup the same way they treat military coup. And it's not the one that they're ready to work with anybody who rigs election, get into office, and then why in a way they are punishing denying visa to some people who help to rig their election, but the people who ultimately get a beneficiary of the rigged election are the ones that they are working with. We cannot continue to have good governance in that way. And as long as we don't have good governance in our respective countries, it will also affect them in terms of the migration that they all talk about. Because where there's no good governance, people will want to go to places where they can find good governance.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aisha Yusufu. Civil rights activist, a human rights activist, and one of the co-conveners of Bring Back Our Girls. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Steve Clements, and I have a couple of questions. What's driving the string of military coups in Africa? And what does it mean for Western policy across the continent? Let's get to the bottom line. 7. That's the number of countries in Africa where people woke up one day to find that their president was ousted and that their military had taken over. And that's just since 2020, just in the last 3 years. We're talking about Mali, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Gabon. Since most of the coups are in former French colonies, France has had the biggest wake-up call of all Western powers. But the wheels are turning in Washington as well, especially since Russia and China are also big players in the region. So what do the changes across the continent mean for the people in Africa and for relations between Africa and the West? What note should Washington be taking? Today, we're talking with Adikana Chihombori Kwao, the former ambassador of the African Union to the United States. Ambassador, it's such a pleasure to be with you again. I've always enjoyed our conversations and learned from them. And I just want to ask you, in the West, when you look at these countries, Mali, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso, Gabon, Niger, the West looks at this like maybe there's a problem going on here. How do you look at it?
There is a serious problem for the West, for sure. I think the West did not see it coming. However, it was very naive of the Western nations to think that the exploitation of Africa was going to continue unabated forever. The West is definitely, if I may use four-letter word, not so kind, they may be pissing in their pants, because what's happening in Africa is indeed a revolution, and a revolution that's way past due.
So you see it as a revolution, but what kind of revolution is it, in the sense that do you think this is throwing off repression from France, from the United States, from other nations? What kind of revolution do you see is underway?
Well, I like to think, if I were to use the biblical term, this is a revelation among Black people. They're waking up and realizing that what has been happening is wrong, is wrong, is wrong, and change must come. And for true change to come, it must be brought by the people. What you are seeing is an African electorate that is now awoken, that is informed. They understand the real issues. In the past, Africans have been misinformed, misled, and given false information, and being thrown a shiny object and being told only the African heads of states are the problem. But now they understand the invisible hand and the role that the invisible hand is playing to make sure that Africa remains where they want Africa to be. The African heads of states, particularly those heads of states of the former French colonies, majority of them were just puppets put in place to continue the same French legacy, which basically boxed them in, where it said you have no control of your military, you have no control of your natural resources, you have no control of your finances, and if you continue from those three areas, you are free to rule your country any which way you want. What power does that president have? And in the past, any president that has tried to back the system and do something about taking control of the financial resources, and I'm talking about African countries depositing their bank reserves with France. I'm talking about African countries giving up their natural resources, no value addition, France having first right of refusal for all the natural resources discovered yet to be discovered, France companies having first right of refusal for all contracts, large, small, private, public, France having military presence in those countries, and France having the ability to invade them in the event that they feel their interests are being violated. France making sure that those countries can only be trained by France, the military can only be trained by France. The military equipment can only be bought from France. Come on now. Our people didn't understand all this. So we can change African heads of states in those former French colonies like we change clothes. If those fundamentals are not addressed, nothing is going to change. The Africans now understand where the real problem is. The real problem, like I've always said, the biggest risk to peace and security in Africa is France. Let's make no mistake about that. We have other former colonizers. Yes, they still have a stronghold in Africa through their multinational companies that continue to siphon billions out of Africa every year. We are aware of that. But the biggest problem when it comes to former French colonies is France. Its roots are so entrenched in those countries, and now France is trying to expand into other nations. Until we address those agreements African countries were forced to sign, nothing, and I mean nothing we do, is going to bring us the true economic liberation, which is what Africa needs, which is what Africa was denied when African countries were being given their independence. We are now dealing with an African electorate that understands what is really going on in Africa.
Well, let me ask you, Ambassador, let's take Niger for a moment. President Mohamed Bazoum is a popular president in the West. You know, the IMF liked him, the World Bank liked him, the United States liked him, France seemed to like him. I would like our listeners to understand the gap in the popularity of someone like President Bazoum and performance, and what is going on that makes that revolution, that coup as we see it in Niger, a different story than we're seeing.
Hosting barbecues, parties, and get-togethers is made so much easier when you've got a place for everyone to convene. And for backyard
The performance that you're talking about is the performance of what Nigerian minerals are doing to French education, to French healthcare, to French infrastructure. You tell me, why is it that 95% of Nigerian uranium is powering over 30% of France, while over 70% of Nigerians have no electricity? How is that okay? How is even President Bazoum proud of himself with that fact? There is no development in Niamey. I was in Niamey a few years ago when we had the AU summit. It was pitiful to see the level of underdevelopment that Niger has. There is no development in Niger. Let's make no mistake about it. Niger is the second poorest country in Africa, in the world, in fact. So how can President Bazoum be proud of himself? What development is he talking about? You're talking about developing France? There is no development in Niger, one of the poorest countries on earth. And of course, IMF would love them. World Bank would love them. France would love him because he is allowing the pilferage, the exploitation to continue. And that's why the people are rising up to say, if you can't stand up to the bullies and tell them that the exploitation can no longer continue, and look President Macron in the face and say, President Macron, how is it okay that my money, my bank reserves, my natural resources are funding French education, are funding French healthcare, are funding French infrastructure? How is that okay, President Macron? Answer us. Africans in Niger, they want to know. So when you tell me that he is favored by the West, it makes sense. But he's definitely not favored by the people because there is no development. Let's be serious here. Let's stop pushing lies about what's happening. They know the exploitation is happening. It's happening in Niger, it's happening in Burkina Faso, it's happening in Mali, it's happening in every African country. Let's make no mistake about this. We're sick and tired of giving up our lunch to Western nations. African children, they need to eat too. African children need to go to school. African children need good healthcare systems. Behind all that abuse, we need to let the Western world know that there are millions of African children who are going hungry, millions of African children who are dying, millions of women, African women who are dying, giving birth to another life, millions of African youth who are unemployed, all because the Western world is continuing with the agenda of exploitation, exploitation, and exploitation of the African continent. That era is over. Well, and we're coming together as Africans and saying, enough is enough. This has got to stop.
From a practical viewpoint, and I just want to challenge you for a minute. I think a lot of people in France who might say, hey, we've got to do something, we have an obligation to do something, see their resources as necessary. How do you get it right? Because if you go to no resources coming into these countries, is that okay? Or what would you advise those in the international development field to begin using as their North Star and how to get this equation right so that Africa can grow on its own terms, but that it's not necessarily cut off from the rest of the world?
I think that's a very important question you're asking, Steve. We're not asking that the Western countries we should just cut them off. No. We're saying the parasitic relationship that these Western countries have with African countries has got to come to an end. We are simply saying we do not need aid, we need trade. They must come to Africa, treat us with respect, treat us as equals. You take, for example, Niger is selling its uranium to France for 80 cents a kilo, when the rest of the Western countries are buying the same uranium at $200, 200 euros per kilo. It is amazing. Over 99% of the value of their uranium is going to France and other Western nations. Value that should be coming to Niger. That is wrong. It is thievery of the highest order. We're simply saying, come to Africa and treat Africans fairly. Trade with the Africans fairly, just like you trade with other nations. And yes, sir, we need foreign direct investment. We need our Western allies, but our Western allies must understand Africans are humans too. Their needs are just as important as the needs of those citizens of the Western nations.
Ambassador, we're talking a lot about France, in part because these coups and the changes in government are happening in all the countries that were part of the French colonial history in Africa and that whole story. But, you know, some of the other big players in the world may be complicit in some of this as well. And I'm interested in your thoughts on the United States and how it gets it right, on Russia, on China, all of which are major players chasing these same minerals and same assets in Africa. Are you worried that some of the patterns and habits of the past are going to just be reinvented and that exploitation continue with China, Russia, the United States? Or do you see any of them doing it better than the others?
I think now that they realize that they can no longer continue to exploit the African, I would advise all of them that this is again time, like I used in my last interview with you, that it's time for all of them to call for timeout if this was a basketball game. Now, I'm going to start with the United States. The United States is actually in a very interesting position when it comes to their relationship with France. France is like a wounded shark. France is like a wounded elephant. You know, like the going says, when you are swimming with the sharks, when one starts to bleed, you get out of the water. My advice to the United States would be, France is bleeding really, really badly. France is wounded really, really badly when it comes to its relationships with Africa. So I would advise the United States to get out of the water, distance yourself from France, because you do not want the negative sentiment, really bad sentiment that the Africans have about France to bleed over to you, the United States, who I still feel that they're in a very good position to take a leading role in their relationships and trade relationships with Africa. So to the United States, I say, France is bleeding, get out of the water. To the rest of the other nations, they've already picked up and realized that. China, for example, China picked up on the mistakes that were being made by the Americans, the mistakes that were being made by the European nations, and China was coming into Africa realizing that, for example, when it comes to funding, European nations would talk and talk and talk about funding. They'll talk about building an airport. They'll talk about building a bridge. 10 years later, there is no bridge. There is no airport. It's still talk. All kinds of roadblocks and red tapes are put in order to access funding. So China decided, we'll make it easy for African countries to access funding. So that's why you'll find a lot of infrastructure projects are being built by China, because they realize where the Americans, the Europeans are dropping the ball, and they're coming in with a different strategy. And therefore, it has been easier for China to woo the Africans to their side, because they're doing things differently from what the Americans and the Europeans are doing. So to the United States, I say, look at the mistakes that France has made. Do something different. Revisit your American policy when it comes to Africa. And the United States still stands a very good position to win the Africans over, but this time, win them the right way. Treat them fairly, and no more playing games, no more divide and conquer. Stay away from the local politics. You do not need to get involved. Let these African countries dog it all out, one child to the other. I like to say opposition parties, ruling parties, they are children of the same mother fighting for their breast milk. Let them fight for their mother's breast milk alone, without interference. So the US is very good at interfering with electoral processes in Africa. That's a bad precedent, because sooner or later, everybody is figuring it out.
Right.
Then you become the enemy. So stop it. Stay out of local politics. To Russia, again, Russia is looking and saying, where is the West going wrong? They are coming in, they see a weakness. Russia came in during the liberation wars in Southern Africa, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, Angola, all those African countries that attained independence through liberation wars. Russia and China came in and realized that the Western world were on the wrong side of the equation. So they came in to say, if we're going to go and win these people over, let's support their struggles, because truly, Russia came in to support these African nations when they really needed help. So you can't blame them. They found an opening, and they supported a cause that was just, that was right, that was needed. And therefore, you see that Russia is being accepted because of what they have done in the past, historically. So people are not going to forget the friends that came in when they were needed.
Right.
it's about looking at what's going on. But when it's all said and done, we're saying to the world, no more can you continue to exploit the Africans.
Right.
The Africans, we have gone through centuries of being stupid, of being ignorant, of being dumb, of allowing the world to just piss all over us. Well, that period is over. Africans are saying, we now know what is really going on. And if you truly want to be an African leader that's going to survive this revolution, you have to be an African leader that is anti-imperialism, an African leader that is anti-neocolonization, an African leader that's going to stand with the people in their pushback against the West, against the East, and anybody else that thinks they can come to Africa and exploit us. They can no longer walk all over us anymore.
Ambassador, when you and I spoke in December 2022, it was a great show and a great discussion. And at that time, you said that America and the White House were not showing African leaders respect, that they did not share agendas, that this was continued policies of racism and neglect, etc. Do you feel like any progress has been made in America's orientation towards some of the issues you raised since last December?
The best healthcare is there in ways big and...
Well, I like it. Let me take you back to the visit to Africa by Vice President Kamala Harris. You know, it was quite interesting that with all the issues that were going on in Africa, for example, when she went to Zambia, there were mudslides that were killing hundreds of people next door to Malawi. She did not go to Malawi, did not even mention Malawi, but spent a lot of time in Zambia trying to push an LGBTQ agenda, an agenda that Africans across the continent are saying it's really not an issue for us. We have more important things to worry about, but Vice President Harris spent a lot of time on the LGBTQ. I'm not saying it's not an important issue, but when it comes to the greater scheme of things, the Africans are telling you that this is not a priority for us. We grew up with people who were trans. I remember growing up in my village, we had men who looked feminine. They would hang around women. They did their thing. Nobody cared. We had women who lived with women. We called them spinsters, and nobody cared. You know, I grew up seeing people who were clearly gay looking, and it was never an issue. So the Africans are telling you that it's not a primary issue to us. Stay away from it. But she did not listen to them. She kept pushing that agenda, you know? So it's like, we don't care what you think. We are going to tell you what you need to do. That was disappointing. That trip from Vice President Kamala Harris was very disappointing. And I've spoken to a lot of heads of states, a lot of African citizens. They were very disappointed with her position.
Well, let me ask you finally, Ambassador, you've talked about the people and that these are in many cases, popular revolutions. Do these military leaders really represent the people? You know, who do you see as the real standouts that can bring a plan, that can bring a strategy, and actually make this popular revolution as you see it successful and to get traction?
That's a very important question. And I would like to caution Africans as well. As we go through these coups, let's take, for example, what happened in Gabon. I had warned everybody to say, push back a little bit. Don't be quick to equate what's happening in Gabon to what's happening in Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali and Guinea. Each situation is different. The dynamics within the quote-unquote coup, which I call revolution, are different. Yes, we like to see change, but not every general means well for the people. The Gabon situation, you got some family issues there. I don't want to go there. So we have to look at it and say, of the three parties, let's dissect them, let's unbundle them. We have the president. We have the wife with the president's wife as well. We got to take a look at her with a critical eye. Then we have the general himself, who is a family member. Then we have the sister to the deposed president, who is siding with the general. Then we have, of course, the opposition party, who now feels betrayed. So there's a different dynamic in the Gabon issue that before we bundle it all up, you look at even the manner in which the general was dressed when he was being sworn in. He looked like a Frenchman, very Western. So we have to understand each situation very differently. But I would say, in my humble opinion, the sentiment coming out of Burkina Faso, out of Mali, out of Niger, that is the sentiment and the solidarity that we are looking for. Those who are clearly standing up and denouncing neocolonization, denouncing imperialism, demanding that exploitation of the continent can no longer continue. That is a common message that's coming out of those countries. I am not getting that out of Gabon, which makes me wonder, who is really behind the coup in Gabon? We need to understand that. Why is the general shying away from that sort of strong message to the people? Because that is what Africa is ready for right now. That is what the revolution that's taking place in Africa is all about. Any leader that does not stand for anti-imperialism, anti-neocolonization, anti-continued exploitation of the continent, that is a leader that the Africans are not going to support, be it a military leader or a civilian leader.
Well, Adikana Chihombori Kwao, former ambassador of the African Union to the United States. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
It has happened. My great Nigerians, I celebrate every one of you for your courage, for we to move on, even when they want us not to move on. Sweethearts, I am standing on the word of God this morning in the book of Luke 11, verse 46. He says, woe unto the lawyers, the judiciary, woe unto them. I want to ask this morning, what you saw day before yesterday, my fellow Nigerians, was it judgment or justice? To me, it was judgment. I have been brooding on it for the past 2 days to know what was it. Was it really judgment or justice? Judgment condemns. Judgment kills. Judgment do not care what people are going through. Judgment do not care the pain that is going to set into the heart of men. But justice is fairness. Justice is honesty. Justice alleviates the heart of the people. What did you people do to Nigerians? Remember, he says, I am that I am. I change it not. I am that I am. Oh, I change it not. God is saying to judges, lawyers, let Nigerians go. I am that I am. Oh, I change it not. He said to justice, lawyers, let Nigerians go. I am that I am. Oh, I change it not. The one that sits on the heavens, that rules over the heavens and the earth, is the one that will give the final judgment. When it comes to judge the world, you that is eating from corruption, don't think that there is no rapture. If you die today, you have faced your rapture. You must surely give account of what you have done. When you were in a post, maybe in the post of the justice, you are a lawyer, you are senator, you are governor, house of rep, wheresoever post you occupy in Nigeria, I am that I am is coming for you. You will give an account of how you manage the people of Nigeria. You put them into pain, you are happy. You struggle them, you are happy. You come to social media and say, let Nigerians breathe. Are they breathing or you are suffocating them with your laws? You create law, you break it. I am that I am is coming. And when he comes, will you be able to stand and say, this is what I did that was fair, is a question, and you must answer it. It may not be today, the day that you drop this body, and you are using to collect corruption. The day you drop it, you will face it. But to my great Nigerians, remember, we are stoic. The more they push, the firmer we become. They will not do more than what they have did. When we are using our money to buy money that belongs to us in the bank, we buy it, it is our own, we will buy it to enable us to spend money. They will not do more than that. Keep hope alive. The judgment of God is going to come like a tornado upon all that have occupied seat in Nigeria. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it. I feel so encouraged. Thank you.
Atiku is still keeping hope alive, hoping that with the release of Tinubu's admission records in Chicago State University, that the Supreme Court in Nigeria will be forced to do the right thing. Yes, immediately the appeal court delivered judgment on the presidential election petition. Atiku quickly applied to the U.S. District Court in Chicago for expedited hearing, that time is running out for him to present the new information as evidence at the Supreme Court in Nigeria. Before we see how the court decided in Chicago, people should understand that this is not in any way trying to give anybody hope. What happened in Nigeria on the 6th of September 2023 was a travesty of justice. The justices turned the law upside down, and now that copies of the judgment have been released, there are many instances where they contradicted themselves. If you would like to watch a thorough analysis of these contradictions, indicate in the comment. There's no need spending time and research to make a video that people won't watch. Yes, a lot of people were discouraged. They are not happy about the delivery of the injustice. This wasn't justice. So many people might not be interested to watch anything that is related to the judgment anymore. So if you want to watch, signify in the comment section. If it gets traction, we'll make it in another video. Now to how the court reacted immediately they received the application from Atiku. The judge quickly moved the date for hearing closer to 12th of September 2023 instead of the initial 15th September 2023. The judge also brought closer the date that he initially ordered Chicago State University to file their objections to the release of academic records and admission records of Tinubu. According to the judge, it was because of exigent circumstances. He said, upon further reflection in light of the exigent circumstances presented by the application, and to account for the possibility of any appeal of the court's ruling. In Atiku's application, he made the court to understand that he has only 14 days to file for the appeal at the Supreme Court. It is very important that Atiku frontloads the evidence while making his appeal so that they won't accuse him of not filing it ab initio. Yes, technicality featured mostly in the injustice that the appeal court justices delivered. Let the disgrace be piling up, not that something good will come out of it, but the more they pile up the evidence against Tinubu, the more shameful whatever they are going to conjure at the Supreme Court will become. By the way, Chicago State University are not arguing that they don't want to produce the documents demanded by Atiku. They are just arguing against the scope. Yes, the scope of documents Atiku once provided is very massive. They feel that they might not serve a purpose in court, but that's not the aim of Atiku. His objective is to prove the real identity of Tinubu. This is not alleged. No one knows anything about him beyond 1970. Yes, there's no records of him anywhere with the same name, except maybe he changed his name. So getting the admission records will prove the primary school he attended, the secondary school he attended. First of all, they must see the secondary school, then they can approach the school. In that school, if they get the records, they will see the primary school he attended. That's how it works. You can't get admitted into a university without presenting a secondary school leaving certificate. Even if he somehow got admitted to the university without attending a secondary school, at least let's find that out. It's an information that can be seen from the school admission records. If it shows that he didn't attend any secondary school, then no problems. It's just like in Nigeria, you can't get admitted in a university without providing your secondary school and your JAMB. It is the JAMB that actually posts you to a particular university of your choice. So all these records will prove the real identity of Bola Tinubu.
You won't get investment returns like this in stocks and bonds. Find out about.
Coming to the other documents, he will use them to prove that he actually attended classes. When Atiku gets these records, it will truly prove that, yes, it is this person that got admitted and it is the same person that graduated from the same university. For those who don't know the backstory, Tinubu has been plagued with certificate forgeries, claiming schools he didn't attend. All his political life has been scandal after scandal. And going by the Nigerian constitution, anyone that forges a certificate must be disqualified from the office he's seeking. Atiku Abubakar, being a candidate in the past presidential election, is seeking these records in order to use that to disqualify him in court. Like already said, you can't find any history about this man before 1970. Why doesn't it exist? The most likely reason is because he must have changed his name. What is that his former name? That's what people want to know. That former name he used to go by, which secondary school did he attend with that name? Which primary school did he attend with that name? Where was he born? Who are his parents? A lot of questions. You can't have such an unknown person holding a big office. And if he truly changed his name, there was a reason he did that. He took up someone else's identity. This was revealed by the same Chicago State University themselves when they responded to a subpoena from a Nigerian lawyer. And going by the information contained in the documents they gave to the Nigerian lawyer, the person that was admitted to Chicago State University was a female. All this burden that Atiku is bearing today, he's the one paying his attorneys in the Chicago District Court, all the runaround, all the investigation, is just too much for a presidential candidate. If all the institutions of government did their jobs, like the Independent Electoral Commission, even his political party, if they truly screened all candidates very well before accepting them to run for the presidential primaries, it would have saved all candidates and everyone a lot of money. It is commendable that Honorable Justice Gilbert of the District Court in Chicago understands the urgency and the importance of these documents to Atiku's appeal. Whether the Supreme Court justices will disqualify him based on the information or not, the most important thing is that this information is out there, that people know that truly he wasn't the one that was admitted in Chicago State University. That's the most important thing that Atiku is seeking. Despite all the evidence that was tendered at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, the honorable justices trashed all of them based on technicality. Now, when this bombshell information will be released, they will have to contend with more evidence. Will the Supreme Court justices continue to say that they did not front-load it with their petition when they filed at the appeal court? Will they validate someone who might have committed identity theft? Yes, if the documents prove that truly he wasn't the one that was admitted, but surprisingly graduated from the same university, will they validate that? Yes, judicial permutations are very easy when the justices follow the law, when they interpret the law to the letter. But in Nigeria, anything can happen. They can turn it upside down. They can tell you, this is the reason this white ceases to be white again, that is no longer white, that is now black. They will tell you everything to make it black, although you are seeing it white before your korokoro eyes. So we keep you updated after the hearing on Tuesday in Chicago to know how all parties argued. Whether they argued in favor or not, the judge must make his order immediately. And if everything turns out positive, Chicago State University must quickly submit those documents to Atiku. And Atiku is expected to call a press conference immediately. This one is not about filing to go to court. He would like to capitalize on the new information, make it public. He might even go as far as inviting international press to cover, to give it a wide coverage. This might force shame on some people, although you can't shame the shameless, but there's no harm in trial. One last thing is that the appeal court judges have proved Nigerians right. In the beginning, many people didn't want to trust them. They didn't believe in their integrity. Even when the presiding judge said that they would decide all matters based on merit, they ended up doing what? Deciding all matters based on technicality. Imagine knocking off 10 witnesses just because they were subpoenaed by the same court. Is that possible? So what they're saying is that any witness that comes under subpoena is no longer a witness of the court. Wonders shall never end.
If you've been injured in a car accident, don't call an attorney. Use this AI app instead. That's what I...
All right. Greetings, everyone. I never greet everybody. And I welcome. Oh, happy Sunday to everybody. When I don't hear everything when I take all the videos, I line them up. I did not want to, I wanted us to get through it. I'm actually looking forward to the court case in America, in Chicago. Let's see. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. Thank God for Ned Media. I'll definitely follow up with him for Tuesday. We'll see what happens with them. Nigerians are it's like people are mourning in Nigeria. I've never seen where people claim that they won or they're the winners in an election, and everywhere is like a period of mourning. No celebration anywhere. All you have is people, all these balablus going to people's comments, making very dumb and daft statements, trying to justify the rubbish. I've been on some spaces and I wonder to myself, where are these people falling from? I don't understand. Matter of fact, there was a guy, one of the spaces I was on, there was a guy that called in and he was saying, somebody asked him, okay, he was claiming that Agbado is not a criminal and he's not a drug dealer and he did not the forfeiture is not a criminal case. Anyway, Shah trying to defend the indefensible. Somebody now asked him, okay, so what do you think it is? He now explained by using his own. He said it's like someone using my like now when people come from Nigeria, you give them your documents to be working. As he was explaining, trying to justify the rubbish, he was not telling on himself. This is how these people see these things. They don't see anything wrong with evil. They don't see anything wrong with any wrongful. Anything wrong that they do is normal to them. These are the kind of people we're dealing with. These are the kind of people we have in Nigeria that are supporting these people, that are supporting this man, this Balabu. When I see a picture for India, e be like castaway. E go dey back. Make I show am. Hey! I say, wow. The man be like say dem tell am say go to the back. They ignore am. Look at. I say, hell! See am. E go dey back. Like e be like say nobody wan even associate with am. Something like that. Make I show una the picture. Ah, God, who I show? Oh, anybody wey wan call him, make e call him now, because I no go take for this life. See am, see where e go dey. E dey look onlooker. See where e go dey. Na the India wey e say e go be that way. No balablu sef, nothing. They themselves, they know that what they've done is wrong. Another person called in and was talking about people should try and speak good of Nigeria, not put the country down. This and that. Now people ask and say, the country is already down. Abi, you know they watch news, you know they see wetin dey happen, you know they see the wetin your candidates don turn Nigerians to. Now when people travel with the Nigerian passport, they go scrutinize you. The scrutiny now, you don before e bad, e don worse now. Una hear about the girl wey kpai for Egypt Air, whatever they call it. 4 days after, na im dem nobody call the girl mama, nothing. 4 days after. They still never know wetin kpai the girl o. They still never know. So if you dey carry that green passport, hey God, the kind of scrutiny no be here. The aircraft wey dem even dey use take carry Nigerians, first of all, e be like molue in the air. They no dey use better aircraft. They no dey use better aircraft. They don't care. They don't teach. When your own people, supposed leaders, politicians, don't even care about you, na dem wan care about you. These people wey dem dey up and down dey abuse people, dey talk rubbish. Nigeria go happen to each and every one of them, one by one. E get one Twitter wey I see, one tweet wey I see. The guy wey dey carry Balablus matter for head, yeah, na we get Aso Rock, make una dey go court, na we get am. Rufai say post your answer. The girl was one of the, abi na guy, was one of the first people to go and post im answer for inside the Rufai tweet. Dey beg say she be teacher, bills are high. Now say look at dis people. Na people screenshot am. Nigeria go happen to those people one after the other. Dem no go see mouth take talk. Mouth dem no go see take talk wetin their eye see. I'm telling you, international, see as e go dey bar. See as e go dey bar. Cast away, see am. Hell! Na wow. Maybe my own be say the country no fit work for everybody, make everybody go their separate way. See all this by force, let's stay together. It's not working. Let everybody do their own. So your tent, is direct. It's not going to work for people. Me, I'm still waiting on Nigerians to do what they need to do. That's my own. Let Nigerians step up to the plate. That's all I'm waiting for. All these things is something that we all expect. What value is this man going to contribute? Things have, the evil that is going on in Nigeria now, it has doubled. It has tripled. Every day na pipe. One bad news or the other, one bad news or the other. Talking about bad news, no, what's her name? This Nollywood actress or whatever. I saw clips, people were saying that they released her nudes or something like that. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on with these people. Is that like a trending thing where people are so, you just release your nudes like that? I don't understand. Please, somebody should explain to me, because me, I don't understand. Is it a new thing for these people to just be released? Is it that there's no consideration anymore? Decency, it has finally pie the natural pie in Nigeria? Because I don't understand why somebody will be so comfortable. This woman has been acting, at least when I used to watch Nollywood then, she was still young. What is this whole thing? At first it was Tiwa Savage, and then it was who else? There are a few people that I'm like, what is going on? I don't get it. Oh, the moral decadence in Nigeria is such that we've never heard of saying before. I don't know if it's something that people should glorify or be excited about. Evil coming out of Nigeria every single day. Evil. On top of that one, someone went to the hospital only for the person to reach the hospital. They don't comot almost all the organs from im body. God. Another one, papa wan remove im pikin. He say wan remove im pikin hunchback for 15 million. The pikin kpai in the process. Hey, egbami. All for monetary gain. It's so sad what is going on in Nigeria. This country is just, it don't kukuma, everything it don't crash. There's no country again, honestly. It is finished, it's done. They don't bury the constitution. They don't kill, they don't buy democracy. Pata, they don't buy and use boot, match and enter ground. Anything where they like now they go dey do. Nobody fit go court again. Na who get money pass na im go dey fit go court. And who get agidi, who get power pass, na im go dey go court, na im go dey win. E simple. Normal people no get mouth again o. If you too talk, person go just do you anyhow, nothing go happen. That's what's going to be happening in Nigeria. It's crazy. Look at Nigeria's leader. Look at him at the back. He go put hand. You no get wetin he wan talk. No sense, nothing, no vision, nothing. Zero. I can't wait oh. Me, I'm waiting on Nigerians. That's all I'm waiting on. I'm waiting on Nigerians. So I'm waiting on Nigerians to take action. That's all I care about. I'm more interested in whatever. I'm just waiting because all of this is expected. Everybody knew. Personally, I knew that this man being there will be the end of Nigeria. It's turn by turn now. Every day you hear pipe. They don't double the heat. So there's nothing that I'm seeing right now that I would say is shocking to me. It's not shocking, no. It's not shocking at all, my people. It's clear. It's obvious. Can they say, hey, God, what an international disgrace, Christopher, my brother. Real one, no. Real one. See as he go dey back. He dey look. Hey, God. Because all of them know say na thief the man dey. Not being supposed dey there. So na so they go treat am. They go dey treat am. They go dey relegate the guy. They go dey relegate am. Photo up. Na him photo up. Hey, Nigeria has faded. No, e don crash. Everyone is leading themselves. I'm telling you, no more leader, nothing to look up to. Nothing. Everybody just dey lead themselves. You dey hope say every bad thing wey dey happen jump pass the person. That's what they're gonna be looking for. Somebody was narrating the experience of speaking up in a scenario where something wrong was going on. They almost implicated her in the process because she was speaking up. They almost carry matter wey no be her own, put am for her head. No, Nigeria, God forbid. Na Nigerians me dey wait for, the ones on ground. Make we see the action na me dey wait for, honestly. And I really appreciate say Peter Obi come talk. Honestly, I no lie. I was waiting for that to happen. As I see that one, I see God go bless this man. No. Peter Obi, forget. This one, that we dey here, fully supported. We go nowhere. Go ahead, Peter Obi, do your thing. We dey here. We dey here for your back. We go dey do the one we fit do. Make we lis ten to the, because me, I never bother to lis ten to the what's it called, the lawyers take and Peter Obi's take. So make we go ahead and listen to that. It's very short, which is fantastic, because I'm going to shut this down in a few. Let's see. Right. Okay. This isn't the word because I never bothered to listen. I signed up after that whole court case. So I never bothered to listen to what they had to say. So let's hear it for the first time. For me personally, it's the first time.
I'm saying that our clients are dissatisfied with the judgment just delivered. And we have the firm instruction of our clients to challenge the judgment on appeal. And the court has promised us that possibly by tomorrow, we are going to get a copy of the judgment. Once we have it, we'll swing into action. Let me say this. We have to be very, very careful in this country. If we are not careful, electoral jurisprudence will virtually disappear. I'm saying this with every amount of sincerity, because when the litigants, when those who contested the election continue to find it very difficult to establish their case due to obstacles all the way, starting by INEC, certainly they may resort to some other means of trying to seek justice, which may not be lawful. And nobody encourages that. Nobody encourages that. So, and also, I commend the Court of Appeal for introducing live streaming. You will recall that we applied to the court to have live streaming of all the proceedings. The court, in its wisdom, did not grant the application, but now in the end, they saw wisdom in it to guarantee transparency. Hence, they introduced live streaming of the judgment. Certainly, it would have been better if there was live streaming of the entire proceedings so that the public will now watch it from beginning to the end and connect properly with the judgment. But this one just started from the judgment, so they didn't start from the very beginning. So I do hope and pray that next time it will be continuous from the beginning of the case, beginning of the hearing, until the end. That is the only way you can ensure transparency. Because when something is open, people will see it themselves and they will make up their minds one way or the other.
Thank you very much.
Finally,
Okay.
I leave you with one word. History. History will vindicate the just.
That's right. History will certainly vindicate the just.
These guys really, they know.
Election Petition Court, DEPC, finally delivered its long-awaited judgments on petitions challenging the outcome of the presidential election held on 25th of February 2023. This judgment was delivered within the statutory time frame under the extant status. We acknowledge the court's contributions to due process and seeming attempt to strengthen our democracy. As petitioners in this case, we respect the views and ruling of the court, but we disagree with the court's reasoning and conclusions in the judgment it delivered. It is my intention as the presidential candidate and the intention of Labour Party to challenge this judgment by way of appeal immediately as allowed by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The PEPC has rendered its judgment, but that esteemed body is not the final arbiter. The responsibility now falls on the Supreme Court. I do know that the judgment is not conterminous with justice. I implore Nigerians to remain focused, steadfast, and peaceful, and to abide by the rule of law and understand this matter has not reached its logical conclusion. Our legal team has already received our firm instruction to file an appeal against the decision. I shall not relent in quest of justice, not necessarily for myself, but for indeed for our teeming supporters all over Nigeria, whose mandate to us at the post was regrettably truncated by INEC. The strength and value of our democracy reside on solid national institutions and our confidence in them. Electoral litigations will almost be unnecessary and non-existent if the Independent National Electoral Commission discharges its statutory functions creditably, transparently, and with tenable fairness. When that body fails, as it did recently, those subverting the will of Nigerian voters, the recourse to judiciary becomes imperative, as is now the case. I thank every Nigerian who has supported our cause and campaign for a new Nigeria, characterized by fairness, equity, justice, rule of law, peace, prosperity, inclusiveness, sustainable growth, and development. A new Nigeria is possible and achievable. I especially thank our legal team, the Labour Party, and the Obedient family, and all those who showed up daily during our court trials. God bless you all, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
I don't know. The person that did this, put this together for him. I hope they had done better, because that camera was shaking, everything was shaking. You know, he still got the message across, but I mean, they should do a better job, man. They should project this man in such a way that, you know, he's a presidential man, so everything around him has to be prepared. You know, go the inside grass, we talk. Ah, God. Anyway, sha, no wahala. My people, now here we go end am o. I don't share all the videos when I need to share for now today. You know, everybody. Reason why I like us to listen to Dr. Arikana is she's representing the whole of Africa, and she always comes with such force and such stance that I respect so much. You know, I appreciate her for the work that she's doing. She's standing for Africa, and she's fighting and at another level for us. So I really appreciate that. And if we're looking at what's going on in Nigeria, we cannot look at Nigeria in isolation. We have to look at what's going on around that country, around Africa as a whole, you know. And we need to understand that the fight we're fighting is not just small fight. So me again, like I said, I'm waiting for Nigerians. And Nigerians are the wait for. When they show say they're serious, we will see the effect for ground. So that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Christopher, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that more. I will definitely go buy mangoes. Kene, thank you. Thanks, highly favored. Everyone that was able to stop by, thank you so much for the likes, for the shares. You guys are doing amazing on the likes and the shares. I'm able to be asked again. I want to say special thank you to you guys for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah? So as our community dey grow now, the village is growing. Yeah? The Kenya, you go soon take over a side of the village. You know, so thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Oh. Una take it easy, abeg. Whatever it is you pray to, Biko, keep Nigeria in your prayers. I don't know whether to call her Nigeria again. To be honest with you, I hesitate now. They shudder to even question. And for me, Nigeria does no longer exist, to be honest. Just exist in regions right now. And I think of Nigeria, I think about all the tribes. I don't even think about Nigeria as a good. Not anymore. Nigeria is dead and buried. Thank you so much. Have a good week too, Kenneth. Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye.